Every morning, long before the roar of tanks or the thunder of artillery, General George S. Patton began his day with a ritual that seemed almost ceremonial. Even on the front lines of World War II, in the midst of chaos, he maintained a routine that reflected both his discipline and his obsession with personal image. By 6 in the morning, he was awake, meticulously shaving and dressing in his signature polished boots, armored uniform, and ivory-handled revolvers. He believed that a soldier's appearance was a reflection of their readiness for battle, and he carried that philosophy not only in his dress but in the way he led his army. As the sun rose over the European countryside, Patton would review intelligence reports and maps in his makeshift headquarters. Every report, every reconnaissance note was scrutinized with a sharp eye. He memorized troop positions, enemy movements, and supply routes with an almost photographic memory, ready to make split-second decisions once the day began. His staff often remarked on his intensity, noting that even a minor inaccuracy could trigger a cascade of corrections. Yet beneath this meticulous scrutiny, there was a method designed to instill confidence in the men who followed him into the fiercest battles. Patton's mornings were not limited to planning. He made it a point to ride along the front lines whenever possible. Clad in his gleaming uniform, he would inspect tanks, observe trenches, and speak directly to soldiers. Witnesses described him as a whirlwind of energy, moving from one unit to another, offering praise, reprimanding when necessary, and sharing the sharp, motivational words that became his trademark. He believed that a commander must be seen where the fighting happens, that morale rose when the soldiers knew their general understood the dangers they faced firsthand. Even during these early hours, Patton's personality shone in ways both revered and feared. He maintained a strict routine for himself and expected the same discipline from his officers. Yet he also indulged in unusual habits. He carried a Bible and a copy of his personal diary, often writing notes about strategy or reflections on the men he commanded. Reports suggest that he frequently tested the limits of his own endurance, sometimes riding for hours on horseback or inspecting lines through freezing rain and mud. To Patton, discomfort was a necessary part of leadership. A general who could withstand hardship set an example for the troops. One of the most intriguing aspects of Patton's morning routine was his obsession with timing. Breakfast was often eaten quickly, and meetings began exactly at the appointed hour, no exceptions. Orders were issued with precision, and delays were seen as failures. Yet, despite this rigidity, he allowed himself moments of sharp humor or theatrical flair, often walking into a briefing room wearing a helmet slightly askew or striking a pose reminiscent of the old cavalry officers he admired. These performances were not mere vanity. They served a dual purpose of inspiring loyalty and intimidating potential dissenters within his ranks. Patton's mornings also reveal a man constantly at war with both his environment and his own psyche. He carried with him the weight of commanding hundreds of thousands of soldiers, the lives of men dependent on his decisions. Letters from his aides describe him speaking aloud to himself as he reviewed troop movements, pacing the floors of his headquarters late into the morning, making mental calculations that would dictate the next maneuver. He rarely paused for rest, driven by an unyielding sense of urgency and the belief that any moment wasted could cost lives. By mid-morning, Patton had transformed from a man of routine into a general ready to move. Horses and tanks were inspected, orders were dispatched, and his personal staff scurried to keep up with his pace. He embodied the very energy of the battlefield, his presence alone a statement to both allies and enemies. Patton was in command, and every soldier under him would feel the weight of his determination. In these early hours before the first volleys of combat, the Third Army's relentless advance across Europe was already in motion, propelled by a man who treated the morning as a battlefield in itself. Patton believed that a general should never issue orders from behind a desk.
He needed to see the battlefield, feel the ground beneath his feet, and watch the chaos unfold firsthand. By late morning, he was often on the move, riding in a jeep or atop a tank, navigating the narrow roads and muddy fields of war-torn Europe. His staff struggled to keep up with his pace, carrying maps, radios, and reports as he darted between units. Soldiers would glance up in awe and sometimes disbelief as the man in gleaming armor and twin revolvers appeared on the horizon, a living symbol of American resolve. He had an uncanny ability to assess a situation in an instant. In Normandy, during the Breakout, he personally inspected frontline positions, observing the deployment of infantry and armor with a critical eye. He would climb into a tank, sometimes with no more than a few aides, and study the terrain through the periscope, noting where enemy fire might come from or where reinforcements were needed. Officers who accompanied him described a man who could simultaneously manage logistics, motivate troops, and predict enemy movements with precision that bordered on the prophetic. Patton's interactions with his soldiers were intense and unforgettable. He spoke directly to those in the trenches, asking questions about supply lines, troop morale, and enemy resistance. He did not shy away from criticism, yet he also understood the importance of recognition. A well-timed word of praise could lift spirits more effectively than any medal, and he wielded discipline and encouragement like instruments of war. Some soldiers found him intimidating, a figure of both fear and inspiration, while others considered him the embodiment of leadership they had always wanted. Mobility was central to his command style. Patton's use of armored vehicles and rapid maneuvers often allowed him to stay ahead of the enemy, disrupting their plans before they could adapt. He monitored convoys, checked artillery placements, and ensured that the Third Army was always moving forward, even in the face of harsh weather or logistical setbacks. His presence on the front line was both practical and symbolic. It reinforced the speed, aggression, and adaptability that became trademarks of his campaigns. Yet this constant movement carried risks. Patton narrowly escaped artillery fire on multiple occasions and once faced a near miss from a German sniper during a reconnaissance ride. These brushes with death did not slow him. If anything, they intensified his focus. He believed that a leader who feared danger could never inspire confidence in those he commanded. Every morning on the front lines was a test of endurance, judgment, and nerve. And Patton thrived in that environment, turning every challenge into an opportunity to demonstrate tactical genius. He also had a remarkable ability to coordinate multiple units simultaneously. As he rode along, he was in constant communication with field commanders via radio, issuing orders that spanned miles of battlefield. Tanks would shift, artillery would reposition, and infantry would advance, all responding to a vision that only Patton seemed to fully grasp. Officers later wrote that his energy was contagious. Even the most exhausted troops found themselves pushed forward by sheer force of his will. By mid-afternoon, his command in motion had set the tempo for the entire army. The front lines were no longer just positions on a map. They were dynamic, responsive, and driven by a single mind capable of orchestrating a vast, complex force under extreme pressure. Every movement, every adjustment carried his personal signature. For soldiers witnessing it firsthand, Patton's presence transformed uncertainty into purpose. To the enemy, it was relentless aggression. To the Third Army, it was a promise. Wherever Patton led, victory, or at least the effort to achieve it, would follow.
Patton's brilliance on the battlefield was matched only by the intensity with which he planned every operation. Even when not at the front lines, he immersed himself in strategy, poring over maps, troop reports, and aerial reconnaissance photographs. His mind was a constant engine of calculation, anticipating enemy movements, supply shortages, and weather conditions. He believed that speed and surprise were the keys to victory, and he structured every campaign to exploit them. Normandy, the rapid advance across France, and the breakout operations were not accidents. They were the result of meticulous planning executed with ruthless efficiency. Yet Patton's genius often collided with his superiors and allies. He was known for bluntness, even arrogance, and his disagreements with General Eisenhower were legendary. Patton would push for aggressive offensives, sometimes overestimating his troops' endurance, while Eisenhower prioritized careful coordination and supply lines. In meetings with British commanders like Montgomery, tensions flared over strategy and territorial objectives. These clashes were more than personality conflicts. They shaped the timing and execution of some of the most pivotal battles of World War II. Inside his headquarters, Patton's daily routine was a mix of intense briefings and constant decision-making. Staff officers worked tirelessly to keep up with his demands, drafting orders that he revised with an almost surgical precision. He expected clarity, speed, and results, and tolerated no hesitation. Yet he also inspired creativity. Officers learned to anticipate his thinking, proposing bold maneuvers that aligned with his aggressive vision. Many historians argue that this combination of discipline and audacity made Patton uniquely effective. Patton's strategic decisions were often controversial on the battlefield. During the rapid push through France in 1944, his units sometimes outran supply lines, leaving troops vulnerable to shortages of fuel, ammunition, and food. He accepted these risks, believing that momentum was more valuable than caution. His drive for speed frustrated some commanders, but it also kept the enemy off balance, allowing the Third Army to capture territory and resources that might have otherwise required months of slower maneuvering. Communication was central to his command style. Patton constantly sent and received messages, ensuring that orders were executed with precision across hundreds of miles of battlefield. He demanded reports from forward units and often personally reviewed intelligence before making adjustments. This hands-on approach, combined with his willingness to make swift, sometimes unilateral decisions, created both admiration and tension among the Allied forces. Many officers respected his decisiveness, while others worried that his recklessness could jeopardize entire operations. Despite these controversies, Patton's strategic brilliance was undeniable. His ability to integrate infantry, armor, and artillery into coordinated offensives allowed the Third Army to achieve breakthroughs that seemed impossible. The liberation of towns, the encirclement of enemy forces, and the rapid advance toward Germany were all hallmarks of his operational genius. He had a unique ability to see the battlefield as a living, breathing entity, constantly adapting his plans to exploit weaknesses and create opportunities. Even during moments of planning, Patton's personality dominated. He could be theatrical, delivering orders with dramatic flair, punctuating briefings with gestures or pointed commentary designed to motivate his staff. His intensity left no room for doubt. This was a commander who expected results, demanded loyalty, and held every officer accountable. While his style often sparked debate among Allied leaders, it also ensured that when the Third Army moved, it did so with unparalleled focus and energy. By evening, after hours of meetings, map studies, and discussions, Patton's vision for the day's operations was firmly in place. Plans that might have seemed impossible were ready to be executed, and the Third Army was poised to strike with the speed and aggression that had become Patton's signature. Every controversy, every clash with allies, and every meticulous calculation served a single purpose: to maintain momentum, protect his troops, and achieve victory on a scale few could imagine.
Even the most disciplined and aggressive general cannot ignore the human cost of war, and Patton was no exception. While his reputation often focused on rapid advances and tactical brilliance, he was deeply aware of the men under his command. In the frigid winter of 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, he personally visited field hospitals, walking among the wounded with a mixture of empathy and blunt encouragement. Soldiers recalled him stopping to shake hands, asking their names, and listening to their stories, all while maintaining the air of authority that defined him. For Patton, morale was as critical as maps and artillery. The Ardennes winter was merciless. Snow and ice covered the roads, freezing men and machinery alike. Tanks struggled through mud, artillery froze in place, and supply lines were stretched to the breaking point. Yet Patton moved forward, inspecting forward positions, motivating troops to keep fighting despite exhaustion and loss. Witnesses describe him riding along snow-covered roads, water and ice dripping from his uniform, yet his energy never waned. He understood that seeing their general endure the same hardships inspired soldiers to persevere. Patton's visits to hospitals were not just ceremonial. He insisted on understanding the conditions his men faced, from the care they received to the medical resources available. He questioned doctors, nurses, and aides, making sure that treatment was effective and that soldiers knew their sacrifices mattered. His blunt style could be startling. He would not mince words when criticizing inefficiency, but he was genuinely committed to the welfare of those under his command. Many men later credited these interactions with giving them hope and motivation during the darkest hours of the war. Daily incidents also revealed the complexity of Patton's character. Reports describe moments when he would personally resolve logistical crises, such as rerouting supplies to a unit trapped behind enemy lines, or improvising solutions when communications failed. His presence on the front lines meant that soldiers witnessed firsthand a commander who was not afraid to share their risks or confront obstacles directly. These actions built a sense of trust and loyalty that few other generals could command. Yet his intensity sometimes provoked tension. His relentless drive clashed with the physical limits of men and machines, and his demand for rapid action in the midst of winter storms sometimes bordered on reckless. Officers often faced the impossible task of balancing his orders with practical realities, and many soldiers endured hardships that might have been mitigated under a more cautious leader. Still, his vision and decisiveness frequently turned desperate situations into opportunities for advance and victory. Patton's leadership also extended to the smallest details of daily life. He monitored food rations, fuel distribution, and even the readiness of medical supplies, understanding that victory depended on both morale and material. Soldiers often recalled how he would pause to observe their interactions, listening for concerns, complaints, or ideas that could improve efficiency. This combination of strategic oversight and personal attention created a level of trust that few commanders could achieve, reinforcing his reputation as both a brilliant tactician and a commander who cared about his men as individuals. Even in these moments, Patton maintained his larger perspective. He was acutely aware that every soldier, every maneuver, and every decision contributed to the broader objectives of the Third Army and the Allied campaign. The liberation of towns, the securing of roads, and the eventual encirclement of German forces in the Ardennes were not just strategic successes, they were the result of countless daily efforts guided by his unyielding leadership. By the end of the day, Patton's presence had left a lasting impact. Soldiers felt both exhausted and inspired, having witnessed a general who could endure as much as he demanded. His personal attention to the wounded, his inspections of forward lines, and his willingness to face the brutal winter alongside his men reinforced a unique bond between commander and troops. In these moments, the human side of George S. Patton was as powerful as his strategic mind, a combination of empathy, intensity, and unrelenting drive that defined his leadership in the most challenging conditions of World War II.
By 1945, George S. Patton had become more than a general. He was a symbol of relentless drive, audacity, and the unyielding spirit of the Third Army. His campaigns across Europe had left an indelible mark on the landscape of World War II. From the breakout in Normandy to the rapid liberation of towns across France and the decisive movements into Germany, every advance carried the signature of a commander who refused to accept hesitation or failure. Soldiers recalled his presence as electrifying, a combination of inspiration, authority, and an unspoken demand for excellence. Patton's speeches were legendary, and they reveal the core of his leadership philosophy. Addressing the Third Army before the Battle of the Bulge, he spoke not just of strategy, but of courage, honor, and the duty of every soldier to rise above fear. His words were blunt, theatrical, and sometimes shocking, yet they instilled determination and unity. Men who had faced freezing temperatures, constant enemy fire, and exhaustion listened intently, carrying his message onto the battlefield. These speeches were more than motivation. They were a blueprint for action, a call to embody the energy and discipline he demanded from himself. His final push into Germany was as audacious as any operation in his career. Patton's forces moved faster than supply lines could fully support, a risk he embraced in order to maintain momentum. Town after town fell to the Third Army, often with minimal resistance, as German forces struggled to regroup. Patton's understanding of armored warfare and combined arms tactics allowed him to exploit weaknesses in the enemy's defenses, making the advance both rapid and devastatingly effective. The liberation of concentration camps during this campaign added a profound moral dimension to his victories, exposing the horrors of the Nazi regime and underscoring the stakes of the war. Even as his operational achievements mounted, Patton's personality remained larger than life. He could be theatrical, unpredictable, and confrontational, yet he earned the loyalty and admiration of his soldiers through action, presence, and an uncompromising commitment to victory. Field reports and personal diaries reveal men inspired not only by his tactical genius, but by his willingness to endure what they endured, to ride alongside them through mud, snow, and fire. This connection between commander and soldier was rare and became one of the defining elements of his legacy. Patton's impact extended beyond the battlefield. His approach to leadership, emphasizing speed, decisiveness, and the human element of command, influenced post-war military thinking and doctrine. Analysts and historians study his campaigns to understand operational mobility, morale management, and the integration of combined forces. While his clashes with Eisenhower and Montgomery remain a topic of debate, they highlight the complexity of his character. Ambitious, relentless, and sometimes controversial, yet undeniably effective. As the war drew to a close, Patton's career seemed to culminate in a perfect storm of experience, skill, and vision. The Third Army's rapid advance into southern Germany, culminating in the surrender of enemy forces, demonstrated what he had long believed: a well-led army, motivated and disciplined, could achieve results that seemed impossible. Even in his final days, he remained deeply engaged, planning operations, reviewing intelligence, and considering the post-war implications of occupation and strategy. Beyond the immediate battlefield, Patton's legacy resonated in the hearts of his soldiers. Many described him as a man who could inspire courage with a glance, a gesture, or a few carefully chosen words. He understood that victories were not only measured by territory gained or enemies defeated, but also by the resilience, morale, and cohesion of the men who fought alongside him. His insistence on personal presence, rapid decision-making, and unwavering standards created an enduring culture within the Third Army that shaped not just outcomes, but the very identity of the units under his command. By the end of the European campaign, Patton's legacy was cemented. He was remembered as a warrior who combined intellect with audacity, discipline with charisma,
and strategy with a deep understanding of human nature. His victories, speeches, and leadership style left an enduring imprint on both history and the men who served under him.